Google's fault?
This is all Google's fault. Okay, so if you'll open up your text to page, shoot, let me look at the 248. We're going to talk about some HR related issues. While you're turning the page, remember there's no tests this week. The test has been moved back until after spring break. We will also be moving into top flight paper mode right after the break, because papers will be due, I think, the first week in April. Okay, and I have put some sample papers up online. If you want to work on your paper over break, please do so. There are also some paper prompt questions that I've put up online on Blackboard. You are not required to answer one of those questions as you write your paper, but many of us will probably find it easier to write our paper in response to one such question. Yes?
Quick question. When do the group work start?
When does the group work start? Shortly after that. We're going to have a crunch of assignments late March, early April. Yeah. How many pages? How many papers? Just one paper.
And how many pages?
6 pages.
Okay.
Yes, about 1,800 words. Okay, if you look on page 253, the topic of child labor is mentioned. Child labor has a really bad reputation in the United States, dating back to this country's historical period when children were abused in the workforce. And for that reason, we have strong child labor laws. Child labor laws can be good and they can be bad. Okay, on page 254, for instance, the book writes, child labor in general should be considered inappropriate or exploitative. Childhood is a time to be educated, and working during this period might not only impede attendance at school, but also submit children to inappropriate influences and risks to their proper development. Much of the hostility to child labor in this country comes from the fact that children tend to be the weakest, most vulnerable workers. And in history in this country, they have, as a result, been exploited because of their inability to organize, unionize, resist exploitative conditions. However, at the same time, there are a lot of critics in the business ethics literature who would say that the child labor laws in this country are too strong. Okay, when I was in high school, my summers were often a wasteland where it would actually have been better if I'd been able to work more. It would have been good for me to be able to work more, but I couldn't because of child labor laws. And often, actually, children's labor can do a lot to help contribute to the family's financial welfare. And so preventing them from doing that in some circumstances might be too much. At any rate, though, it is a sort of a topic that varies widely on the basis of cultural situation and economic situation. I want to move to minimum wage and talk a little bit about that, another HR-related ethics issue. Most of the issues in this chapter, occupational safety and health, sexual discrimination or harassment, they're not controversial. Like, yes, it is good to have a safe work environment. Yes, it is good to avoid harassment, etc. But one topic that is controversial is the minimum wage. And we've talked a little bit about that in class before. It's controversial because it is a policy that is well-intentioned and may actually help certain people, but it may also harm the people that it's designed to help, depending on your perspective on this. Okay, so the classic argument for the minimum wage is that if we didn't have minimum wage laws, then employers would attempt to use their negotiating power to compel workers, especially the weakest workers, to work for as little as possible, much less than what a living wage would presumably be. Okay, the argument against minimum wage, though, is that actually by setting a minimum wage, society influences and incentivizes companies to automate, to reduce jobs, to eliminate the kinds of positions that would otherwise go to those workers. Okay, so minimum wage laws, so it might be said, help those who do have jobs, but they also cause people to lose jobs and hinder people who do not have jobs. Minimum wage also tends to create inflation. It's something that leads to higher living standards and higher costs of goods. So inflation in the circumstances in which it is widespread. Yes?
This is like super random question, but like, what if we had maximum wage? How would society
Yeah, so we look really different. So I think it would be, I think that is entirely too utopian. Like the wealthy, this country is so oligarchic in its control. Like they would never be allowed.
I mean, but like it doesn't. No, I'm saying like maximum wage, like, but like it's not okay. It's not actually like communist or like.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's communist. Yeah.
But like for some, like, cause you could work under, like, let's say our maximum wage, like we can only earn up to $100 a day, and.
That's a pretty low maximum
Well,
wage.
I'm just saying, yes, I'm just saying, but like, so some people they can get up till 70 or 30, but I don't know how that works.
Yeah. So I'm with you in spirit. So I actually I've developed very strong convictions about the topic of compensation over the years, especially as I've seen the graphs and the statistical trajectories. As I've seen the graphs and the statistical trajectories about how the wealthy have become so much wealthier in this country over the last few decades. I'm with you in spirit, but in practice, it would never happen. It is what it is. So.
I was thinking. I don't know.
I believe the Biden relief bill. Does it have a $15 minimum wage for all federal employees? I think.
Yeah, plenty on that. Turning the minimum wage into $15 an hour.
If they set it at 15, that'll pressure all the private employers to go to 15 as well. So that means inflation may be incoming. We will see.
We're not going to be able to afford anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's the cost. That's the cost that we must sometimes bear.
Dollar menu on McDonald's is going to be like $10 menu.
All right, friends, that's all I got for today. Again, the rest of the issues in the work and workers' rights chapter, they're kind of non-controversial, so there's not really a reason to talk about them. Just do read it and think about those issues. I mean, everybody basically agrees on them, though. The problem is, in practice, companies try to avoid the rules and violate them where they can.